steel tides roar, engines echo through the.
Hello, folks. I'm Fred McMurray, and we're back with How Harbor Freight Can Help. We're talking with Senior Vice President Eric Trout of Harbor Freight Logistics. Did I get that right? Close
Harbor
enough?
Freight Transport Corporation.
All right, Harbor Freight Transport Corporation. We're talking the logistics brokerage side. So we got some more questions for Eric to put him on the hot seat. You've been good. How was your vacation? You were
It
on
was
vacation.
great. Yeah.
Where'd you go?
Went to Yosemite National Park. Highly recommend it. It's a good way to unplug, literally and virtually. Not great data and cell phone reception out in that part of the country, so it's kind of nice to step away when possible. But it's
Ah,
beautiful.
unplugged and relaxing. Yes. More people should do that, says the man with way too many computers in his office.
Right.
All right. So, people, this isn't how Harbor Freight can improve your vacation. We'll talk about the stuff people care about. So,
There you go.
question I got for you is, how does your warehousing and transloading operations integrate with brokerage services?
So, Harbor Freight Transport Corporation, our core services, the port drayage and the transload and warehouse, that's asset based. We operate Harbor Freight Logistics LLC, which is we operate as a truckload broker, which enables us to, go and outsource when needed, when we don't want to put cargo on our own assets, to cover other areas that might be outside of our scope. With our drivers that are very specialized, with the heavy out of gauge equipment, um, or type shipments, it's important to have them and that knowledge base of handling that type of large cargo, making multiple turns within the port to the warehouse and et cetera. We don't operate as a pure, what I would say, traditional truckload broker. Like we're not going out and we're not utilizing load boards like a pure truck broker would do, where you're more or less dialing for diesel. I would say our operation is more of a freight management type approach. So we've got a stable of asset based carriers that pick up from our facilities on a daily basis, that are asset based, that we utilize to move, and we trust them. They've got their specialties, heavy super loads, etc. Right? We've got a stable of carriers who we can go to for that. For dry van freight, we've got a stable of asset based dry van carriers who they can drop equipment, for ease of loading at our warehouses. And then it's more of a push versus a pull. A pull, you're kind of looking for capacity. Whereas when you have that empty asset equipment, you're then just saying, hey, I loaded this trailer with X and this is where you're going. And we've got a contract rate already established in those lanes, or a rate per mile to that state or area. So, a traditional truckload broker, I over my 27 years of the industry, it ranges from, two people in somebody's basement, just brokering trucks and calling, shippers, do you have any cargo? To, major call centers where they're taking young people, off the street. Here's your 150 customers that you need to call to see if they have any freight, and then they hand it off to go secure the trucking capacity, et cetera. We don't operate in that realm, right? It's a more condensed, asset based. Our truckers know us, we know them, we feed them capacity. or they provide us capacity. We feed them the business on a week in, week out basis. So it's a nice relationship. And then how does it benefit the client? First and foremost, nobody likes bills, right? Nobody likes invoices.
Well, some of us
And
invoicing people, but not receiving.
exactly. When you utilize Harbor Freight Transport for the port dray transload and then manage the final mile or the outbound trucking to the final delivery destination, one of the biggest benefits is that the client's going to get one invoice, right, from one party. Now, if you think of all those different aspects, potentially you as a client, if they wanted to utilize their own drayage provider, from the port to the warehouse, that could be an asset from one provider or an invoice from one provider. Then you would get the warehouse invoice from the warehouse provider. Then you're having to deal with an invoice from an outbound trucker or a carrier. So we consolidate all of that and we present to our customers one clean invoice for a, soup to nuts, origin to grave type approach. So it's easy for the customer to understand. It's contracted. We spell out on our rate quotes exactly, the services that are required and the rates that are there. Our rate quotes that we generate are generally valid for 30 days. Certain truck brokers won't hold their rates for more than 2 weeks, especially when the market is in flux, tariffs, et cetera, like that. So yeah, 30 days, but the nature of our business, we typically are able to extend those rates for a longer period of time if the customer asks us to be able to hold it. Just because of the relationships that we have with the trucking community that we utilize through our brokerage service.
All right, so let me see if I can simplify that answer. One, I heard a vetted database of resources you have, so it's not like you're not loading. I won't use that analogy. It's not hit or miss. You have people you've worked with for a long time, so the client knows that they're going to be their cargo is going to be where it's supposed to be, how it's supposed to be, and taken care of. You got a
Correct.
simplified invoice so that instead of getting 72 different invoices, like for my heart attack, I get one, which to me, that always makes life easier. And the last thing is, you've been doing this for a while. You're not dialing for dollars and just taking any old thing. You're actually
Yeah.
understand what you're doing. Those are the three real big things that came out to me as just somebody who's listening of,
Yeah.
you know what you're doing, it's safe, and this isn't something that's a three sheets in the wind program.
Yeah. Fred, that brings up a great point that we should discuss. Going back to the original statement, we're more of a freight management
Mhm.
relationship versus a transactional broker. In our industry, if you look at the industry trade magazines, freight theft and fraud is at all-time highs.
Mhm.
While there's great aspects of technology that are out there to automate things, and I don't want to say that, digital platform where people can go, kind of like a ride share app, etc. Those platforms exist, in the freight market. You know, theft and fraud being at an all-time high, that technology also is an enabler for some, bad players to be
Mhm.
able to set up false companies. And then there's that loss of that, we'll call it human in the loop approach, right? Where you're actually vetting and you're saying, hey, is this a real carrier or is this somebody who's just saying, oh, yeah, I got it and this is my rate. And next thing you know, you've got a missing truckload of cargo and, you know, the minimal cost for a cargo that's stolen. Most carriers, well, you're required to insure a full truckload up to $100,000, right? Just at base level. So other materials could require 250,000 cargo liability. So, it's significant amount of money if you get something stolen or misplaced. So going back to that piece, the stable of carriers that we utilize, they're known entities. They're extremely well vetted. They are, they're safe, compliant, good citizen type transportation companies who have the proper equipment and they've got the industry knowledge to know how to haul those products safely from point A to point B. And when you talk about some of the products that Harbor Freight transport, transloads, and what we warehouse on a day to day basis, that's extremely, extremely important due to the value, the complexity, etc.
So I really like that phrase, freight management company. The other phrase that you kicked off was from my IT career, which was I was always used to dealing with projects with multiple vendors, and all I really wanted was one throat to choke when something went. So you guys are
Yeah,
fighting that one throat to choke, and to me
correct.
that's what if I'm a shipper, that's what I'm looking for is one person that or one group I can say, I need this to get from here to here, and I'm going to come and choke you if you don't get it there.
Yeah, correct. We streamline that process. We one throat to choke. We call it the control tower approach, but it's a little more pleasant. But um, yeah, it streamlines the whole process. Our clients don't have to, you know, figure out through emails who's the right point of contact. Let me just go direct to Harbor Freight Transport. Let me get the coordinator who's managing this and let them figure it out. So yeah, it's a streamlined process for
I
sure.
To me, that would above and beyond anything else, that would be one of the number one reasons I'd use Harbor Freight Transport. So flip to our next topic. Um,
Okay.
International shipping is a whole big topic these days. So, what are the biggest challenges for cross-border shipping into Mexico and Canada? And how do you help shippers navigate those issues?
So um yeah, I mean it's funny. International shipping, most people think of it as, crossing oceans, continent to continent. And, my history with Mexico and Canada shipping, it's pretty funny because when you go call on prospective clients and you say, well, I need to speak with your person who manages international. Well, that's fine. Here's a trade compliance person. Here's ocean freight, international air cargo. Go speak to so and so. They do that every day. So you go speak to them and you say, well, let's talk about Canada and Mexico, international shipping. And they say, "Oh, no, 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 no. We don't manage that. You need to go talk to so and so and the domestic transportation team." Right? So then you go talk to that person in the domestic transportation side, and what we've seen a lot is they say, "Oh, no, 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 no. We don't want to even mess around with that. We just let our Canadian counterparts or Mexico counterparts, they manage all that transportation." Right? So there's a there's a lot of there's a lot of deflection. The international departments really don't want to manage it if it's not truly coming in on an ocean carrier. The domestic transportation providers, they kind of really don't want to mess with it because they've got bigger fish to fry 9 times out of 10 just on pure US to US. And so they'll let their Canadian and Mexican counterparts manage that. So it's not that complex. There's the basic information that you need to know when you're shipping cross border. First and foremost is the documentation that's needed. Going into Canada, is it going to move in bond? You can move products in bond through the U.S., not entering that product into U.S. commerce. And so it can move out of our bonded locations on a bonded truck all the way up to the border, and then it'll get entered into Canada or Mexican commerce, right? So you got to know your paperwork there. Is it moving on a 7512 T&E? You got to have a bonded carrier. It's pretty blocking and tackling, right? You also have to have the commercial invoice and certificate of origin. Who made the products, et cetera, so that product can be successfully customs cleared. What is probably the biggest piece of information that most people are missing is who is the actual customs broker at the border who's going to do the clearing, right? Everybody knows this is where the product's going to pick up, and this is the final delivery destination. But it's at that choke point at the border. It's like, who are we going to provide this documentation and the paperwork to effectively and efficiently get the products entered into that country? A lot of times that information is missing, and you've got to go ask the right questions. And that's kind of like peeling the onion. It's kind of peeling back the layers. And like I said, the domestic transportation team, they're probably going to say, "Oh, we don't know. You gotta go contact X party," right? So it's kind of a shell game, but it's pretty much blocking and tackling. You need to have your bullet point list. These are the things that are needed to ship cross border. Once you have that, then there's really not a whole lot of mystery to it, right? It's pretty easy to ship across border to Mexico or into Canada. And the same thing is, for import loads, shipping from Canada into the U.S. or Mexico into the U.S., pretty much blocking and tackling. Mexico has different laws. If you're shipping from Mexico into the U.S., you have to have what's called the carta porte. It's basically all the bill of lading information that you would typically have, to transport. So it's not that big of a mystery, but it is some added documentation that you have to have. But our team can walk you guys through it. We do cross border shipments all the time. Again, our stable of carriers that we utilize in our network and our freight management network, they do this day in and day out. They're pros at it, and it's not an issue. So we can make it really easy and simple for our customers.
So what I think I heard there was the biggest issue is people not having their documentation correct and knowing who to talk to. And Harbor Freight's been doing this a long enough time that they know how to make sure that correct documentation's there and they know who to talk to. Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's not all brokers, customs brokers are created equal. So
I would.
there's some smaller players and there's some very large players, and knowing who to go to and talk, the industry talk on the documentation and what's needed, that helps out a lot because the process is the same, documentation is the same, but given organization sizes difference, et cetera, do you get custom, mom and pop type shop approach? That's great. They work great. Or do you get large organizations and, then you have to navigate that. But like I said, as long as you've got the documentation and the bullet list of what's needed, and you can identify that, the process doesn't change. I mean, there's close to, I think, what did I see in Laredo, Texas alone? There's I want to say over 7,500 river crossings a day. Um,
Wow. That's a lot of
yeah,
car.
it's a lot of cargo. The 5 border crossings in the state of Texas alone has more commercial commerce going cross border than the Port of Long Beach, California,
Wow.
for
Okay.
all international shipping. So,
All right. So I'll move on to another topic. As I was doing my research before we got on, I came across a phrase that I hadn't heard before. So, what is an airport recovery?
yep.
How does Harbor Freight support that? And then how does that benefit time sensitive freight?
Yeah. So, I mean, just like when you go in the TSA security line to catch a flight, you just can't take a commercial vehicle to an airline and say, I'm here to pick up, as you would at any shipper. So
Uh,
you have to have drivers who have the proper security clearance and identification, TSA certified, TWIC cards, transportation worker identification cards, etc., to be able to go into these airline facilities to retrieve cargo. Um, going into those facilities, it's also a lot of industry knowledge has to get passed down. You have to present yourself to the window, or the shipping window, and you're going to have to be supplying them with a delivery order that has either a house airway bill or a master airway bill, right? So you have to have those documentation numbers to pick up, because once again, they're just not going to give that cargo to anybody, right? So our drivers are they go into the airports every single day, and they pick up cargo from those air cargo facilities. So they're very well versed in what's needed, at each specific airline, because each one, could require something a little bit different. And those drivers, they are accustomed to doing that. There's also fees that need to be paid. Whether the air freight forwarder pays those, or you want Harbor Freight Transport to be able to advance those charges in order to pick up the cargo. You have storage charges. I mean, you can imagine airports don't have large warehouse, cargo staging areas. So you get very little free time, 24 to 48 hours, and then you get storage charges. And they accumulate and rack up very rapidly. So our drivers are prepared to go in, and if they see a hiccup, hey, storage charges are due, they're trained to be able to call back to dispatch saying, hey, here's the issue. Get with the customer. Do you want us to advance the fees, et cetera? And so Harbor has ways to be able to pay those fees immediately, to specifically get the driver, well, get the airline or the cargo handling facility paid and current to what they need to have to be able to release the freight to our drivers, and then our drivers efficiently get it back to our warehouse for processing. So that really can streamline it. I've seen instances where certain airports just they all are different and they operate different. But I've seen instances where certain companies have gone in 3, 4 days in a row and they just will not get the cargo picked up. And every time that the driver goes in, you're talking about a dry run fee for that driver, so there's added cost there. And then the storage charges, from the airlines, that they're going to get paid or they're not releasing that cargo.
So I wanna reiterate that because to me that's a huge thing. So not only do you guys try to minimize the number of times the driver goes in, but you will actually save uh, uh, cargo receivers money by paying the fees off so that they'll release the cargo quicker, and the person shipping or the person receiving reduces their shipping costs or storage costs at
Right.
the airport. That's a
Yeah, we try. Yeah, we try to mitigate the overall expense to the client. So, if we arrive at the facility and there are charges due, our drivers will call back to dispatch. Dispatch will get with the client. It 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 depends upon, the situation, but
right.
we've had situations where the driver can go ahead and just pay those charges right then and there and get the freight and move on, versus if a client says, no, 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 we want to go ahead and pay it, that can take time for them to process through their accounting, et cetera, which could add days onto
But
that, which
there,
adds up
sure.
to additional charges. Yeah.
So then the other question I got is you said the drivers go through TSA. And as somebody who's got TSA pre-check, I understand that. My
Yeah.
question is, on average, how many colonoscopies does each driver get per year because of TSA? Never mind.
I don't know. I don't know that. So
All right.
no, I mean that that's the benefit for our port and airport drivers. They do have the proper credentials to go in, and there's no holdups whatsoever.
You can have the proper credentials and still get colonoscopy. Yes.
Yeah, right.
So, all right, we'll leave that topic. All right, last topic for today's episode. We haven't really talked about really big, bulky stuff like steel or pipe or construction materials. So, how does Harbor Freight Transport tailor its services for shippers in industries like steel? I mean, my dad was spent all his life dealing with the steel industry. And so I know a bit about that. So how do you guys tailor your services toward those big, big, bulky things? Aluminum, steel, piping.
Yep. So it's all about safety and having the proper material handling equipment, right? Um, all of our warehouses, we've got the heavy duty forklifts, at least 35,000 pound rated forklifts to be able to lift very heavy loads. We have what are called jibs, uh, extensions that go on to the forklifts that can effectively go into the container, to pick up long products with that jib. Um, not everybody has that type of material handling equipment that we do. For 78 years, that's what Harbor has excelled in, is the big, heavy, bulky stuff. So, um, there's also other aspects of when that type of product is loaded into ocean containers. There's blocking and bracing that has to be in place, to safely transport that in that ocean container. Or, as you're shipping outbound, you have to have the proper blocking and bracing materials as well, transport it over the road. Harbor has been doing it for so long where, we know how to strip out that quote unquote dunnage efficiently and effectively without tearing up the ocean container. Most of that stuff is nailed into the floor of the ocean container. And then, you've got to use pry bars to pull it out and pull nails, etc. Not a lot of warehouses want to do that, right? But in order to get to that cargo and be able to manage it efficiently out of that, you've got to have the proper tools and handling equipment. And all of Harbor's facilities maintain that proper equipment to safely and efficiently handle those materials.
All right. So my last question, well, I got two last questions. One of the questions is, how do you want people to get a hold of you? But before we hit that question, what is it one thing that we haven't covered yet about harbor freight transport, logistics, things like that? What is it one thing that you want people to know?
Just the ease of doing business, to be perfectly honest with you. We're not a large organization. We're a proudly family-run organization. Steve Senior's third generation. Yeah, Steve Senior. His father built the company. Steve Senior comes into work every single day. Steve Junior, he's running the day-to-day. So in terms of, there's not a lot of layers of bureaucracy there. So ease of doing business and just the ease of being able to get to a decision maker in a very efficient manner if needed, right? So we're a relationship driven business, and being a family run business allows us to foster those relationships and nurture those relationships.
So if I were going to sum that up, I'd say Harbor Freight Transport, a long-term generational business that makes your shipping your cargo easier.
Correct. Yeah. Navigate a safe course to the safe harbor, right?
Excellent. Even better, you got the navigate in there. Okay, so how should people get a hold of you to say, Eric, I want to use Harbor Freight Transport?
Yeah. It's you just send email to rates@harborusa.com. That's the easiest way. That goes direct into the rates team. And from there, we've got our rates department. They're sifting through all those emails on a daily basis. And, depending upon where the product's coming into, we have an internal process to be able to get that rate request to the proper person to get you a quick and efficient turnaround on your rate request.
So that's rates@harborusa.com.
Correct. Yes.
I'm Fred McMurray, and this has been Eric Trout, telling you how Harbor Freight can help you do shipping easier, simpler, and with less stress. We'll be back again in a week or so. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Rolling in like the steel.